Most people imagine Roman soldiers fighting for glory, honor, or the promise of gold, but that belief belongs more to legend than to reality, because the Roman Republic did not survive by paying its armies in money, it survived by paying them in land. And that choice, practical, efficient, and seemingly generous, quietly rewired loyalty, power, and politics in ways that the Republic could never recover from. In the early centuries of Rome, soldiers were not professionals. They were citizens who owned small plots of land, men who left their farms to fight when the state demanded it and returned home when the campaign ended, supplying their own equipment and expecting no reward beyond survival and civic pride. But as Rome expanded beyond Italy and wars stretched from months into years, this system collapsed under its own weight because farmers who stayed away too long lost their crops, fell into debt, and returned home to find their land gone, forcing Rome to confront a dangerous new reality: thousands of trained, disciplined, battle-hardened veterans who were poor, landless, and politically volatile. Rome could not simply abandon them because soldiers who feel betrayed do not disappear, they organize. And Rome also could not reliably pay them in gold because war drained the treasury, coinage fluctuated, and the state's finances were never stable enough to guarantee long-term military pensions. But Rome did have one resource in abundance: land taken from defeated enemies, and so land grants emerged as the solution that appeared to solve everything at once, rewarding veterans, removing restless soldiers from the city, settling Roman citizens in conquered territories, and expanding Roman influence without additional military force, all while avoiding direct strain on the state's finances. On the surface, this looked like generosity, but in practice, it created a dangerous dependency because land grants did not come automatically from the Republic. They required political approval, and that meant soldiers no longer owed their future to the state as an institution, but to individuals who could secure those grants. And slowly, almost invisibly, loyalty began to shift away from the Senate and toward generals. This shift accelerated as the Roman army professionalized, opening its ranks to the landless poor who enlisted not out of civic duty but out of necessity, men with no property, no prospects, and no stake in the republic itself, whose loyalty was not ideological but transactional because they followed whoever promised them land, security, and a future after years of service. Gaius Marius formalized this transformation when he restructured the army to recruit the poor and promised veterans land as compensation. But the Senate frequently delayed or blocked those grants, and when that happened, soldiers remembered who fought for them and who did not, and it was never the Senate they remembered, it was the general who had marched beside them, bled with them, and spoken directly to their needs. From that moment on, Roman armies stopped belonging to Rome and began belonging to men, and once loyalty became personal, civil war was no longer a matter of ambition or accident. It became a structural inevitability because generals now needed land to reward soldiers, political power to secure land, and armies to gain political power, creating a self-feeding loop that pushed Rome further away from republican governance with every campaign. Julius Caesar understood this dynamic better than anyone because his soldiers followed him through years of brutal warfare in Gaul, enduring hardship and danger with the expectation that their sacrifices would be repaid not with coin but with land. And when the war ended and the Senate hesitated to honor those expectations, Caesar faced a choice that revealed the true nature of Roman power: protect the Republic's authority or protect the loyalty of his army. And when he crossed the Rubicon, his soldiers followed not because they believed in Rome's laws, but because they believed in Caesar's promise. This is the part of Roman history often romanticized, but land grants were not acts of kindness, they were instruments of leverage, because once land was distributed, it reshaped society itself, concentrating property in fewer hands, displacing traditional landowners, and filling Italy with veteran colonies whose allegiance was tied to the memory of a commander rather than to abstract civic ideals, turning soldiers into permanent political actors rather than temporary defenders of the state. Each civil war produced more veterans, each victory demanded more land, and each distribution weakened the old republican balance further, until Rome became a state trapped by its own reward system, unable to stop granting land without risking mutiny, and unable to continue granting it without eroding the very institutions that defined the republic. Gold could be spent once and forgotten, but land endured across generations, binding families to political outcomes and embedding military loyalty into the landscape itself. And by the time Augustus brought the civil wars to an end, the solution was no longer to restore the republic, but to abandon it, centralizing control of the army under the emperor and formalizing land grants as an imperial prerogative, ensuring that loyalty flowed upward to a single authority rather than outward to competing individuals. The Roman Empire was not born solely from conquest or ambition, but from compensation, from a system that traded land for obedience and stability in the short term, while guaranteeing political collapse in the long term. Because when soldiers owe their future to individuals instead of institutions, power becomes personal, laws become negotiable, and republics become unsustainable. Rome did not lose its republic in a single dramatic moment. It dismantled it slowly, quietly, and legally, one land grant at a time, until the state itself became secondary to the men who controlled armies and the land that rewarded them, leaving behind a lesson that echoes far beyond antiquity. Armies that are paid with permanence cannot easily be returned to neutrality, and loyalty once purchased cannot be reclaimed. History does not repeat, but it rhymes, and Rome's choice to pay soldiers in land rather than gold reveals a timeless truth about power. Because when the state ties survival to personal reward instead of shared obligation, it may win wars, but it forfeits the future. And Rome learned too late that the price of loyalty bought with land is the slow surrender of the very system it was meant to protect.